You're listening to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, hello, everybody, and we are back for another episode of Head to Head. So, tonight, we're basically talking about Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who has recently been cast in the Ahsoka series. She is going to be, obviously, the latest addition. Thing is, we don't really know who she's playing. So that's kind of interesting to me. So what we thought we would do is actually go through some possible characters that Mary might actually be playing that would actually fit, right? So as you guys may have noticed, I'm on alone, right? It's not head-to-head, it's just head. Because unfortunately, looks like Daryl can't make it. I don't know what's going on, actually. He hasn't indicated that there's any technical issues on his part, although sometimes he gets so busy trying to solve the issues, he doesn't really have time to text. So hopefully, we'll keep an eye out for him. Hopefully, maybe he joins us at some point during the show. But if not, that's cool. You know what? There's me, there's you guys that are watching right now, so this would be a good time to chat in. And then also make sure that you smash that like button. I'm probably going to remind you guys to do that quite a bit. So, you know how it goes. When I have to carry the show on my own, being that this is basically made for a back and forth dialogue, I usually prefer that I get a lot more chats. Kind of helps things along. But you know what? We have a really, really cool show tonight because these are the ones that are always really fun to me. Is the whole speculation on the characters. Now, I don't remember, I have to admit, usually Daryl's the one that kind of researches a lot of this stuff, right? And if you guys know in the chats, let me know. I don't exactly remember a lot of the movies that Mary Elizabeth Winstead has been in. I remember kind of, and I know the name, but I just don't, like off the top of my head, because like I said, I was not expecting to be doing this show on my own tonight. So my apologies if I seem a little bit discombobulated, but you know what? I got some coffee. I got Star Wars. I got you guys. So it's always a good time. So a little bit of background. For those who don't know, Ahsoka Tano obviously is a character who got her start in the Clone Wars and was instantly hated. Like, nobody really liked this character. And I have to confess, I was one of those people. I didn't like the character either. In fact, I absolutely hated it. And Ahsoka made me not want to watch the rest of the show. I'll be honest. I found her really annoying. I found her a little bit unnecessarily, I guess, catering to the younger audience, because I understand that Star Wars is for kids, don't get me wrong. But I don't know, I just found her a little bit too overbearing for my taste. But then a really strange thing happened. As the seasons progressed in the show, her character got a lot more depth, she had a lot of growth, and as a result, she is the only character who we have seen from, I guess you can count Luke Skywalker and maybe Anakin. Because, after all, Anakin was like 9 years old when we first met him. But Ahsoka is one of the few, I'll put it that way. She's one of the few characters that we've seen go from, practically like from the very beginning, like a young teenager, all the way up through adulthood. I think around the time of The Mandalorian, when she makes her live action debut. We'll see. Now, Brittany Taylor, and apologize if this thing doesn't come up quite right. Oh, it does. Good. So she's Arlani. So have you actually heard that for a fact? Because I have yet to see. I got the idea to do this show, I'll be honest. I got the idea to do this show based on an article that came out, I don't know. It was like something on some website a couple of days ago. And it was current, because you do have to watch that. Because a lot of times what will end up happening is something will pop up in your Google feed or whatever, and then you find out that what you're reading is actually like, years old. RG50, you're joining us too. That's cool. So Brittany, RG50, smash that like button for me because it really does help the channel. Because I know sometimes, it's easy to get caught up in the discussion and forget, but really helps to hit that like button. And of course, it's also a good time to just say, hey, if you guys aren't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you guys know when we're going to be coming on. So let's see. Brittany says, I totally think she is Arlani. Okay. Well, you know what? Since you brought it up, she actually happens to be, wait for it, the first character that we're going to talk about. That's right. Arlani. That's probably my choice too, I'll be honest. If I was going to choose somebody for her to be after seeing a picture of the actress, because again, either if anybody knows what other movie she's been in, Ronaldo's joined us. Hey, Ronaldo. If you guys know what other movie she's been in, let me know. Because honestly, and this is so embarrassing, like I said, normally, you have a show like this, you try to do your due diligence and do research. Honestly, anybody that has watched this show more than a week knows that's usually Daryl's role in this whole thing, but he's not here. And unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to do it. And it's embarrassing, but I cannot remember for the life of me what movie she's been in or who she's played. And I know they've been big, too. Some of them are probably even my favorites. But I do remember what she looks like. And I think Arlani would be a really good choice. Now, for people that don't remember who this character is, obviously she's a Chiss, right? So she's from the same race as Thrawn. And believe it or not, she actually did get her start in Star Wars Legends along with Thrawn. She was actually a pretty popular character. And a lot of people weren't sure if she was going to carry over into the whole, like the new canon. But much to my surprise and everybody's surprise, she did end up moving over to the new canon. In fact, not only did she move over, but she plays a really prominent role in the Thrawn novels. And so one of the theories behind her playing Arlani is the fact that not only does Arlani factor heavily into the Thrawn novels, but because Thrawn was mentioned by name by Ahsoka in her live-action debut in Season 2 of The Mandalorian. I'll give you a second to think of all that I just said. But people think that it makes sense, given the role that we see Arlani play in Thrawn's life, that if he's around, it makes sense for her to be there too. Now, you also have to remember that one change that they did make in New Canon was instead of Captain Paleon, who was sort of Thrawn's right-hand man in the old Legend series, they changed that because they somewhat altered how Thrawn got into the Empire. I mean, it was basically the same story. Thrawn pretty much, was kind of wild. He was kind of like hunting and doing all this stuff. And then the Empire were trying to find him and everything. Or they actually accidentally discovered him, invited him to join the Empire. They had some mutual interests. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, of course. But basically, that's how Thrawn was introduced. And so what they've done is they created a new character named Eli Vanto, who now is more or less Thrawn's right-hand man. And then when Thrawn went into the whole back to the Chiss, he took Eli with him. And Eli actually, they kind of had this whole like exchange program or something. So Eli joined the Chiss. Thrawn, of course, is with the Empire. And Arlani factors in very heavily with all of that. Ronaldo says, Arlani makes sense, especially with Thrawn. Yes. Yes. And that's why, I mean, honestly, when I put this list together, and you'll see, there's basically 5 people 5 characters that we think she could possibly play. Thrawn being mentioned really heavily in The Mandalorian, so he's kind of fresh on everybody's mind. And of course, that's where Ahsoka was introduced. Like I said, Ahsoka basically, shows up in The Mandalorian Season 2, and after some interaction with Din Djarin, who is the title character of The Mandalorian, what does she do? Where's Thrawn? So that tells me that Thrawn is going to play a really significant role in the Ahsoka series. And so I have to say, if Thrawn plays a really significant role in the Ahsoka series, it only makes sense that Arlani would be there. Now, it is possible to actually have this series go on without Arlani being there. After all, Thrawn actually made his debut into the new canon through the animated series Rebels. So, we'll have to see on that one. But again, so far it sounds like you guys are thinking the same thing. At least those who are chatting with me right now seem to agree that, yeah. Brittany says, he was listed as a lead, Thrawn. Yeah, I know. And again, if I was a betting man, look, I'm with you guys. I honestly think that Arlani makes the most sense, because if you really think about where they would be going with this series, it just seems to me like, I don't know, that would actually be where my money would be. But check this out. Like I said, I got 4 other candidates that we're going to go through here. And you guys, weigh in on it. Certainly anybody that's watching after this live stream, feel free to comment. What do you guys think are the chances that Arlani could be the one? So far, obviously, based on everybody that's chatting with me right now, it's pretty strong. Okay, so our next runner-up is Hera Syndulla. If you remember, one of the good reasons why I think that we could see her playing Hera is because of the fact that Rangers of the New Republic is no longer a thing, right? That was canceled. Once, oh man, I blanked. Gina Carano. I can't blank on something that simple. Once Gina Carano was out of the running and, she was fired by Disney, it made sense that maybe Hera would become the new lead for Rangers of the New Republic, but then shortly after that, they decided to cancel the entire show. Now, of course, there has been talk about bringing it back. So there have been, as of right now, it's canceled. But, there's always a possibility that maybe they'll bring it back. But if they don't, and if Rangers of the New Republic stays a dead show, they're not going to do it. One of the things that was suggested was they would then take some of the characters that they were going to use in that show and just put them in their other series. And obviously it would make sense for Hera to be put in Ahsoka, because Hera interacted with Ahsoka in Rebels, and there was a significant story arc there. And if I remember correctly, they casted somebody to play Sabine Wren. So if they have Sabine in Ahsoka, it completely makes sense for Hera to be in there as well. The only thing that I would question is maybe if there was any kind of a, like an age thing or something. I mean, it just depends on how they, obviously you got makeup, she's I think she's a Twi'lek. There's that other, because technically Ahsoka is not. I was corrected on that at one show or another. Ronaldo says, I think Hera is the second best choice. Ronaldo, I'm curious to find out if you're going to look at this list that I got and just think that this ends up being like the top 5, right? So Arlani's number 1, Hera's number 2. Not going to release number 3 just yet. But because honestly, once I was really reading through this article and I saw these options, you can make a case for a lot of them. Mostly because The Mandalorian, The Book of Boba Fett, soon to be Ahsoka, they're all taking place during the same time period, and they're starting to bring in a lot of these characters. I remember when, I think it was episode 2 of the Book of Boba Fett, where they brought in Black Chrysanthemum. I mean, that was mind-blowing to me. I never would imagine in a million years that they would bring Black Chrysanthemum in as a live-action character. Because keep in mind, he was only in the comic books. He wasn't even an animated character. They just literally brought this guy in right from the pages of the comics. Boom, live action. Cast him and everything. It was fantastic. Couldn't believe it. And once they did that, and of course, we're going to talk about on Monday the just insanely wild Book of Boba Fett episode 5. Incredible. But let's just say they're tying a lot of these series together more tightly now than what they were doing before. So I think Hera is totally a good possibility for casting in Ahsoka, because it would make sense. I'm still, between these two, I'm still going to lean towards Arlani, just because of the Thrawn connection. But then again, you can turn around and just say, well, look, Sabine's going to be in it, and Ahsoka's there, and she interacted with the crew of the Ghost big time in a huge story arc in Rebels. So, we'll have to see. So again, what do you guys think about Hera Syndulla? You think that that's a viable choice or not? Leave a comment in the comment section below. All right, so moving on to number 3. The show might actually be quicker than I thought. Number 3 is Dr. Aphra. Now again, Dr. Aphra is another really good example, and she's somebody that has been featured very prominently in the comic world, but not so much in any animated series or anything like that. She was kind of like Black Chrysanthemum, who of course is pictured here. And the reason why I actually chose this picture, because I could have just, found a solo picture of Aphra, who, by the way, is one of my favorite characters. I got to talk about Dr. Aphra for a little bit, but one of the reasons why I chose this particular graphic is because it includes Black Chrysanthemum. And one of my arguments for Aphra to possibly make her appearance in the Ahsoka series is that Black Chrysanthemum has already made it into live action. And so it seems like they're really starting to reach into the comic world now, because like I said, the War of the Bounty Hunters comic series, huge. There is so much canon in there. It's almost to the point to where it's required reading. I don't usually say that about a lot of these peripheral media, but okay, so Joanne says, when is this series starting? We don't know. Probably, I would say, trying to remember what I said. So last Friday's show, if you didn't see it, we went through all the series that were going to be debuting this year in 2022, and Ahsoka, of course, was one of them. I think we said that this series was going to be coming out possibly in the summer or fall, because we think that Obi-Wan's going to be a little bit more towards the spring. We think that the season 3 of The Mandalorian's probably going to be around December again. So it's really tough to say. Ronaldo says, it could be Aphra, but I don't think so. I'll be happy if it's her. We already have Chrysanthemum. Next could be her. Well, that's basically the argument that I'm using. Now, here's the thing. I think... It wasn't the Acolyte. Maybe it was. There was one of the series that they said that they were going to come out with. I remember Kathleen Kennedy said it was going to have kind of a, almost like an Indiana Jones feel, right? It was going to feature a female character, and it was going to be, they're going after artifacts. I thought that was the Acolyte, though, because I remember those comments sort of confused me a little bit. that would make the most sense to have Aphra in. Well, not timeline-wise, obviously, because when it takes place. But I mean, if you were going to do kind of a Star Wars meets Indiana Jones style show, that's what you would do. You would definitely have Aphra, because Aphra is the Indiana Jones of the Star Wars world. She's like the closest thing that we have to it, right? I mean, she's such a great character. I think she debuted in one of the Darth Vader comics. Probably the 2015 series. Probably the same series that Black Chrysanthemum did, actually. And instantly, I thought that she was a great character, mostly because she is unlike a lot of the characters that we have seen in Star Wars. Usually when a Star Wars character is created and introduced, doesn't matter if it's in a movie, especially if it's in a movie, but if it's in a movie, maybe an animated series, even a book or comic, they tend to follow certain templates. And that's because when George Lucas created Star Wars, he was following certain templates. The hero's journey style of storytelling, the Joseph Campbell stuff, some of the samurai stuff. There's all kinds of things that Lucas's was influenced by and he put into Star Wars. So therefore, you basically have these different templated characters that end up making their way in the Star Wars universe. But Dr. Aphra is a little bit different. Like I said, she's almost like a female Indiana Jones or something. Ronaldo says, have you read the Aphra novel? I have not. In fact, I think you mentioned they had a novel before, but I forgot all about it. So you gotta chat in the name of the novel now. Because, first of all, I am so behind on Star Wars books right now. Hey, just so everybody knows, I finally finished the High Republic novel, Into the Darkness. Great, fantastic book. But here's the thing that's funny about that. So I read that after Light of the Jedi, because I think it came out afterwards or something. And I found out that wasn't even book 2. Because they have these different simultaneous stories or something. And I just got, what's it called? Like The Fallen or something? It's the latest High Republic book that just came out. And I was going to start reading that, but then I realized that it wasn't actually book 2. So I have a couple of High Republic books I got to read. I have, Queen's Peril, Queen's Shadow. I have those I got to read, which I think Daryl was still in the middle of one of those. What else do I got? Oh, the other 2 Thrawn novels. So they had Thrawn Ascendancy, Chaos Rising. They've actually put out 2 additional books in that series because it's a trilogy. So I still have to read that. So I would love to read the Aphra novel, though, because I really do think that she's just a phenomenal character. I think that she, more than, if you were to ask me who should be the next person to get their own Disney Plus series, the Dr. Aphra series would be what I would do. Now, granted, I'm not talking about anything. I don't mean next as far as next chronologically. I mean, if they were going to announce something new. Obviously, I want to see the Acolyte. Obviously, I want to see, I'd like to see Lando. They haven't actually said anything about that show. And we have no information about it whatsoever, other than the fact that it was announced. Okay, so Ronaldo says, Star Wars Dr. Aphra by Sarah Kuhn. From what I remember, it's the same story from the comics, basically. Okay, so what they probably did, was it a graphic novel, or was it literally like just a straight up novel, no pictures, a grown-up book, basically, right? I would be curious, because the whole Dr. Aphra storyline is just so interesting. And I could, honestly, getting the discussion back here, I could see her popping up in the Ahsoka series very easily. I think that, honestly, she would be a good fit for the Ahsoka series. And the reason why I say that, I think a lot of people would be surprised by that. Because, again, I already said that if I had to pick up all my choices, And so far, you guys know 3 out of the 5 choices. But if I had to choose out of even just these 3, I'm still going with Arlani. Because story-wise, that makes the most sense. And plus, I would love to see another Chiss in live action. But I think in order to balance out the Thrawn storyline, you have to have somebody else in there. And Arlani, actually, if you read the Thrawn novels, she is a really cool counter character to Thrawn. She is very much Thrawn's ally, but she has a slightly different way of doing things and going about things that's extremely interesting and makes for a great interplay between those 2 characters. Ronaldo says, yeah, it was a grown-up book. Okay. Grown-up book, no pictures, got it. I'm going to have to look that up. You know, one of the things that I've been meaning to do, we stopped doing it. Daryl and I actually tried to do a whole book review show. Because we were actually, you know, obviously we have our Mothership live stream series, which is this, which we do every Friday night. And then, of course, on Monday nights at 8, we're usually reviewing a show, or maybe we'll go in depth with a character or something like that. Or, I mean, if some news thing breaks, we'll talk about that. But generally, that's what the Monday show is about. It's usually reviews and things like that. But what we were going to do was maybe not a live show, but upload book reviews. The problem is we can never read the same books at the same time, finish them, so we could do a comprehensive review, right? Because it might take me like, I don't know, a month to get through a book. You know, maybe it takes Daryl 2 months. Maybe he gets through it in 3 weeks. I mean, who knows? So it was too hard to do, but I could do them. You know, I could just do it on my own and just upload book reviews, because there's so many great books out there that I would highly recommend. And they really are becoming more ingrained in what I would call the canon proper. It used to be that if you just watched the movies, you'd be fine. Maybe the animated series too. But anything else, the comics or the novels or whatever, would just more or less enrich things. You didn't necessarily need to read them, but if you did read them, it would make the films and everything more satisfying when you saw them. Perfect example that I always give is Catalyst. If you read the book Catalyst, which is a prequel to Rogue One, and then you see Rogue One, it puts things in a completely different light. And it really enriches the storyline. Is it necessary? No. The problem is, a lot of the books, comics, everything that they're coming out with now, it's starting to get to the point where you almost do need to read them, because something that starts out in a comic might pop up in a TV series, and you'll be lost if you don't see it. And I'm really referring to the Book of Boba Fett. Well, maybe it hasn't gotten that bad yet, but you have the Book of Boba Fett, you have the Mandalorian, you're soon going to have Ahsoka. They're all taking place during this time period. The War of the Bounty Hunter comic series, and now the sequel comic series, which is Crimson Reign, which is actually the second issue, is coming out Tuesday or Wednesday. I mean, it's got the return of Kira and Crimson Dawn. It's very heavy with Boba Fett storyline. I mean, there's a lot going on that if you're a Star Wars fan, this isn't just frivolous stuff. I mean, this is like really deep canon stuff that you really need to know going forward, because it could actually affect an upcoming series, maybe a story arc or two. It just depends. So I'm really curious on what they do. And I would love to see Aphra get her own series. And I think that the best way to do that would be to introduce her in one of these other shows. Maybe put her in Ahsoka. Or maybe even put her in one of the other ones, like The Mandalorian. We'll have to see. All right. So our fourth choice that Mary Elizabeth Winstead could play. Oh, wait a second. I want to get to this one comic. I'm not trying to keep you guys in suspense. I just wanted to get this one. So Ronaldo says, I think it's an audiobook made from the original script from the comic. That could very well be. Don't know who did Aphra's, but it was how I imagine her voice. Very cool. You know, let me take a second. I'm not trying to stall, but let me take a second to actually credit a lot of the voice actors that do the audiobooks for Star Wars. And they have, you know, music and sound effects. I mean, it's literally like listening to some of those old radio shows. And they do such a phenomenal job. And the voice actors that they get for those shows, it's just amazing. It's incredible to me. All right. Next choice is Barriss Offee. I would say this is probably one of the least likely choices. You know, it's... Like I said, it's kind of out there, but she was a Padawan at the same time as Ahsoka. The two were really good friends. You know, Offee got disillusioned with the Jedi Order. Ahsoka got disillusioned with the Jedi Order. You know, there's some similarities there, and there are some storylines that they could explore if they wanted to do that. Filoni himself has said that he has plans for the character. So, since he does already have some existing plans for the character, it would make sense. I'm not saying that this is a high probability, but it would make sense to possibly put Barriss Offee in the Ahsoka series. Again, I don't know. The problem is, it's not that I think that it would be a bad choice. I just think that the other three that we've done so far would be a much better choice. You know, looking at the four people that we've covered so far, we've had Arlani, we've had Hera, we've had Aphra, and now we have Barriss. Who would I like to see in there more? I mean, so far, honestly, you know, I was joking about it with Ronaldo earlier, but this would be my top 5. Because Arlani would be number 1, Hera would be number 2, Aphra would be 3, Barriss Offee would be 4. Well, maybe, because I do know who my number 5 choice is. Ronaldo says, if you think about Ahsoka's story, it's possible. Exactly. As I gotta be honest, when this is brought up in the article that I read, it was a weird choice to me. It was a really, really strange choice to me. I could not figure out where this came from, but when you really stop and think about the history that Barriss and Ahsoka have, it could actually work. And I could see maybe some things moving forward. The other thing that I'm looking at as well is the fact that you do have not just each of these independent series. This is something, by the way, I think Lucasfilm is doing correctly. They're finally doing what I've always wanted them to do. And that is, they've got all these different live-action series. So far, we have 2 of them that have been released. But we also have Ahsoka coming up and everything else. And they're all happening in around the same time period. But what they're doing is, they're actually starting a storyline in one, picking it up in the other. They're doing a lot of crossover stuff. There's things happening in the comics that are informing things that happen in the series. There's things that might start in the series and then maybe continue in a novel. They're actually taking the canon as a whole and treating it as just one big universe / storyline rather than compartmentalizing it. Because that's been the problem up until now, right? Is that they basically have gotten everything pretty much... What am I trying to say here? So, in times past, when Lucas was in charge, the way that they used to do this is that Lucas had his movies and his Clone Wars series, right? And then what would happen is you'd have the old expanded universe, now Legends authors writing all these stories. Now, they were licensed by Lucas, but Lucas made the distinction that only his stuff was canon. And what he would do is if something caught on enough with the fans, he might throw the fans a bone, and because he was making the prequels at the time, and he would do things like, have Quinlan Voss's name mentioned or something. There's little things that, that they would do. Oh, by the way, I heard from Daryl. And he said that he had gotten mixed up because our review of the Book of Boba Fett, Episode 5, which will be Monday, which is usually at 8 o'clock, will have to be 10:30 because of a job that I've got. So we're not going to be able to jump on at the normal time. He got mixed up and thought that was tonight. So, so Ronaldo's got a couple of things to say. He says, just a quick question. Did you like Episode 5 of Boba Fett? You're going to have to tune in Monday. But I'll tell you this. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. But that's all I'm going to say because I want to save the rest of it for the review. So Ronaldo's like pretty much in order? Yeah, more or less. This list is, that's what I'm assuming that you're talking about. This list is pretty much so far in order. I will tell you this. I did not intend for that to be the case. It's just kind of working out that way. Ronaldo also says, some people still think the EU was canon. The problem with that was Lucas would flip-flop back and forth, right? Because I think people are getting the canon part of it mixed up with the authorization part. So, was the expanded universe authorized? Yes, it was authorized. Is it canon? No, unless Lucas puts it in one of his things. But here's where it gets a little strange, Ronaldo, and this is what I think Ronaldo is talking about, by the way. Sometimes an interviewer would say something or whatever. Oh, Boatwright Family of Comics has joined us. Hit that like button. That's kind of my new thing. It's like when people jump on, it's like, yes, welcome to the show. Now hit the like button. But pretty much what would happen is an interviewer would point out some storyline from, some expanded universe novel, right? They'd bring this up to George. And they'd say, yeah, there's this novel that's out, and, it basically said, Yoda was this, or Luke did that, or Han did this, or whatever. And they would basically ambush him and say, yeah, is that true? Is it canon? Now, in a lot of cases, George would just say, it's only official if it was in the movies or the Clone Wars, or pretty much anything he did. However, sometimes, if there was something that was intriguing enough, he would go, yeah, okay, fine, we'll make that official. And so I think that that's where people get a little bit mixed up, because I remember as a fan back then, because remember, not only did I start Star Wars from the very beginning, 1977 as a 6-year-old kid in the theater, but I also, when the book started to come out, right with Heir to the Empire in 1991, I was right there. Now, again, I haven't read every single novel, right? But I've read a lot of them. And I remember it was funny because Lucas would do all these interviews and, they would just ask him, point blank. He'd be like, all right, yeah, that's official. And you're like, what, really? And then there's other times where I remember there was a particular time with Yoda. Somebody wanted to do something with Yoda, and Lucas basically told him they couldn't do it because it's not the direction he wanted to go. So the weird thing about it is Lucas would sort of keep his eye on the expanded universe. He didn't really read any of the books, but he had to sign off on the stories. So an author would approach him, say, hey, I got an idea for a Star Wars book. They would pitch it to him, or, I don't know, maybe he would read the treatment or something. And he would then sign off on the storyline as well as some of the details. And it was up to the story group to monitor the books, because Lucas isn't going to read them all, so it's kind of like the story group would proof them, make sure it was cool. And that's basically how the old expanded universe came about. But now everything's canon. Supposedly. That's what Disney had said when they first bought it in 2012, right? It's like, yes, everything's canon now, but then there's been a little bit of walk back from that. It's, well, some of the stuff in the games, maybe not so much. And of course, the novels, although it's really nobody's fault, whenever you write a novel based on a movie, you have to get the script well in advance because you have to have time to write the novel. Problem is, scripts have a tendency to change as the filmmaking process goes on. So an infamous example is, in the novelization of The Force Awakens, Rey and Poe actually met and interacted with each other. But that didn't happen in the final film. And so it really wasn't until the end of The Last Jedi that Rey and Poe finally meet. So, so let me go back to these chats for a sec. Starting to get away from me here. RG50 says, best episode yet, talking about episode 5. Okay, you got it out of me, man. I agree. I totally agree. The only thing that I'll say, in addition, is it's interesting that the best episode of the Book of Boba Fett doesn't have Boba Fett. Just saying. That's your little sneak preview to Monday Night Show. Another little note about Monday Night Show. We're scheduling it to start at 10:30. I hope to be home from this job at 10:30. But hang out for a little while, because if I'm not home by 10:30, we will go live. It just might be a little later. So it's kind of a soft 10:30. Let's see. Ronaldo says, was it about a trading card where there was a Yoda and others from the same species? I don't think that was the actual issue, but I do remember that, and I do remember that caused a little bit of a controversy. And yeah, Ronaldo says, yeah, George was really angry because of that. And then, of course, Joanne comes in and asks a really interesting question that we can discuss. Why start something in one format and finish in another? So, and I'm interested to hear everybody's thoughts on this, but on one hand, I have always said that if you introduce something in a particular format, you have to explain it in that format. And I still feel that way. So in other words, if you introduce a concept or something in the films, then they have to be answered in the films. A perfect example of this would be The Rise of Skywalker. So it starts out, and you have this whole thing where Palpatine's back alive. And, everybody is just, in the film, it's just sort of a matter-of-fact kind of thing. Oh, yeah, there was that message from Palpatine that kind of went out galaxy-wide. They alluded to it in the opening crawl. And I suppose that somebody could say, well, that counts as them addressing it in the film. But here's what was funny. You know where we actually got that message? Fortnite, which is a game. And those are the kinds of things that drive me nuts. So my whole thing is, if you start something in a film, you got to explain it in the film. To answer the question, why start something in one format and finish in another, it's because sometimes in order to flesh out different characters, you need the freedom that books or comics or something give you. The other thing, too, is a lot of times the opposite will happen, right? So you'll start out with something in a film, and then you can really get into the details in a book, because a lot of things in books don't translate well on film. Another thing that you can do is in the Like in the case of the TV series. This is one of the reasons why I honestly think that, things are going to thrive on Disney Plus. I really think that Star Wars, even though technically, yes, the theatrical experience, that's really where Star Wars has its heart. But from a practical standpoint, it's really on Disney Plus that I think that we can get into some really cool stuff, because instead of a 2.5-hour movie, you can tell a 10-hour movie, because you could do these series and you can really get into it. Now, some things, it could actually work against you, because maybe something is better off just being told in a very short, concise storyline. If you try to do it in a series, it might be dragging it out. You might have a lot of filler episodes, that kind of thing. So I don't know. But I think, honestly, that the concept of them being able to go in different areas of the franchise through books and comics, Disney Plus, the films. Because if you think about it, when it comes to a series or a film, it takes longer to produce those. I'm not saying that it doesn't take long to write a book or a comic, but generally the turnaround's a little quicker. They come out with comics every week. And you can have multiple people doing it. Ronaldo says, the comics and the book should be additional material if you want to know more. Yeah. I mean, overall, and I know I've said that in the past. The other thing, though, like I was saying with the War of the Bounty Hunters, I do think that that's kind of a cool use of the comics. It's sort of the reverse of what you just said. And I know this, you could almost say something like, well, what's the difference between your issue with the whole Palpatine thing and them setting something up in War of the Bounty Hunters and then finishing in the movie? And the answer to that question is, because they're essentially setting this stuff up, and now they're using the current series to expand on that. It's almost like they're doing it the other way around. They're starting something in the comic, and then if you want to expand on that, you do it in the series or the film. But here's the difference. And this is the way that I used to judge it. If you can watch that series or that film and perfectly understand it within the confines of that particular media, I'm fine with it. My problem is when you actually need the other piece of media to then understand what you just saw. Which goes into what you're saying, right? So it's, in other words, if I watch a movie and then I read something in a comic or a book that enriches that film, the Rogue One Catalyst thing is a perfect example of that. Right? So, okay, I watched Rogue One. Cool. If I read the Catalyst novel afterwards, I'd be like, oh, well, now thinking back to Rogue One, or maybe I watch it again, I have a different experience. It enriched it for me. But if Catalyst actually introduced key elements that helped me to understand Rogue One, so seeing Rogue One by itself, I just didn't understand it, and I needed this other piece of media to understand it, that's where I would have the problem. All right. Ronaldo's like, so what's number 5? Right? It's sort of like this whole discussion things. Everybody like, come on, man, what's going on? Let's do this. All right. Won't keep you guys in suspense any longer. Here's a little bit of curveball for you guys. Mara Jade. Number 5 is Mara Jade. Mara Jade, of course, as everybody knows, anybody that's been a Star Wars fan for years knows, this is the one glaring omission that has come from the new canon. So, she's one of the oldest characters, right? She was introduced in Heir to the Empire, that first novel back in 1991. She was the Emperor's Hand. Now, what makes this time period a little bit better to introduce this character versus maybe before is the fact that now that they brought Palpatine back in episode 9, now you open the door, because they basically, and they supported this in a lot of the novels, by the way, particularly the Aftermath trilogy. You basically have a case to put Mara Jade back into this whole thing. Back into the franchise. I almost said back into canon, but she was technically not canonized. So I would love to see her back in. You would have to rework a few things, much like what they had to do with Thrawn, but you could do it. You could actually make this happen. And again, if I were going to do this whole like top 5 thing, the only thing that I would change is I would flip 4 and 5. So 4 would be Mara Jade, 5 would be Barriss Offee. So again, our choices for anybody that kind of tuned in late or whatever. Let me just go through them again really, really quick for you guys. First one we had was Arlani, right? So Arlani, and I still think that this is probably the most likely based on, the actress, the storyline, everything that we know so far. I think that this would actually be the best choice. Our number 2 choice, Hera Syndulla. Hera makes sense, especially given the fact that they've canceled the Rangers of the New Republic. She was, at first, it was going to be Cara Dune. Then they were thinking of, well, since Gina Carano kind of messed up and we had to fire her, fine, maybe we'll put Hera Syndulla as the main character of Rangers of the New Republic. Okay, they canceled the show. But maybe we put her in Ahsoka. And that would make total sense, because Sabine's going to be in Ahsoka. And, of course, Ahsoka interacted with all those people. Everything else. At number 3, we had Dr. Aphra. I mentioned Dr. Aphra because, they brought Black Chrysanthemum in. Aphra plays not necessarily in any current movie or film that we've seen, but in the comic world, she's all over the place. She crosses over to virtually every single comic. The main one, the Vader series, War of the Bounty Hunters. She has her own series. It's all over the place. At the very least, I would like to see her in a game. Maybe she's in a game. Maybe I'm just not aware of it. Number 3, we had Barriss Offee. Again, she basically was a Padawan with Ahsoka. They became very good friends. She also became disillusioned with the Jedi Order. They followed parallel paths. And Filoni did say he has a lot of future plans for this character. So I could see it. And then, of course, finally at number 5, we have Mara Jade, which, of course, would make sense. They could rework her a little bit. It would help support maybe what's happened to Luke. It might explain his grumpiness, right? I mean, there's a lot of things that we can look at. So that's basically our 5. And Ronaldo says, here's the thing. I think Mara will be canon at some point, and it will be something related to the Jedi. It could be Ahsoka. Well, that's a good point, because I didn't really think about it in terms of being that she was the Emperor's hand and she wanted revenge against Luke in particular. It probably does make sense that if she were going to appear in something, it would be Jedi-centric. No doubt. I don't think you would see her in, Rogue Squadron or something, or, some unrelated. I mean, I could see her. I was going to say The Mandalorian, but even that would be kind of a stretch. Ahsoka, I think, would be the best thing. The Acolyte would be a good choice, except the fact that it takes place way before her time. Unless they decide to reinvent things. But I don't think that they're going to do it. And then Ronaldo says, I don't have a specific character, but I think she'll be a dark side character like a Sith or an Inquisitor. That could be. I mean, after all, she is. You also have to look at where Ahsoka is at this point, right? I mean, she's still not technically a Jedi. she left the Jedi Order. She's kind of doing her own thing. She helped Din Djarin discover some truths about Grogu. Well, number one, his name, right? I mean, we didn't, up until then, we were all calling him Baby Yoda. And sometimes, I admit, I still fall into the trap of calling him Baby Yoda. But it's Grogu. So she was really instrumental in helping him with that. So it would seem that if they were going to bring somebody in, because, you know, we already know we have a Sabine Wren cast. There's been actually some people, we haven't really covered it in any real detail, but there's been a lot of movement on the Ahsoka series. So much so that that's what inspired me to do this, because they cast Mary Elizabeth Winstead, and they came up with this, you know, I can't even remember who actually came up with this list, but I think it was Screen Rant. And I thought it was intriguing. And in fact, I agreed with it, so I thought this would be a great discussion topic. Because remember, this show's not really a news show. It's really more of a discussion show. You know, news comes out, we talk about it here for an hour or so. So, again, you know, you guys will have to let me know whether you're chatting live, you still have a little bit of time to chat who you think Mary Elizabeth Winstead could be playing. But definitely in the comments section. Let us know in the comments section if you're watching the rebroadcast of this. Who do you think Mary Elizabeth Winstead's going to be playing? We gave you our 5. Now I want to hear from you guys. In addition, remember that Monday night, we're still planning on doing our Book of Boba Fett episode 5 review. Believe me, I have not been looking forward to reviewing an episode of this show more than this one. But unfortunately, I have a gig that night. So we can't do it at a regular 8 p.m. Eastern time. But I didn't want to actually move it on you guys, so I'm like, you know what? Let's try to do it at 10:30. But let's make that a soft 10:30 because I'm not sure exactly if I'm going to be home right in time to do that. But Monday night, we will do a show, and I hope that you guys can join us for that show. But I want to thank you guys for another great discussion on a Friday night. This is awesome. It's too bad that Daryl got mixed up and he wasn't able to join us tonight. But hey, he'll be there Monday night. And you guys, once again, made it an absolute pleasure to chat with you guys. This is one of my favorite things to do all week. I look forward to chatting with you guys on Friday nights, Monday nights at our normal time, 8 p.m. Eastern. So remember, this Monday, Book of Boba Fett episode 5. We're going to talk about it. We're going to review it. We're going to speculate about it. And it's all going to happen at 10:30. That's the time. But just keep watching, YouTube. You guys will see us come on. Dwight's joined us. Dwight, you're going to have to just watch the rebroadcast, my friend, because I'm about to close out the show. So I'll see you guys Monday night. With that, may the Force be with you always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you always.